Every single day, I regret going to college for political science. Hello, everyone. Today, I want to talk about why I regret going to school for political science and why I do so every single day. If you've watched some of the intro videos to this channel, you'll know that I graduated with an honors degree at Penn State in political science. I wrote a thesis in political science, and frankly, none of that really matters to me much right now. I managed to get into law school, but I want to talk about why I decided to go for political science, what it was like during school, what it was like during the law school admissions process. You'll see why I talk about that. And finally, how I've used my degree. And then after I get through that, I'll talk about why I specifically regret it and expand upon that further. So, first, why did I want to join political science? Well, I've always been interested in the law and law enforcement and government. I originally wanted to be a police officer growing up, and I had a stern talking to that probably wasn't a best idea. And frankly, I mean, if you look at me, I probably wouldn't have made it through the academy, so that talking to was probably the best thing that I've ever had. But I decided to go for political science because I thought it would be useful to me for law school. I decided that I wasn't going to police officer, I would be a prosecutor. So, still similar kind of work, still similar kind of subject matter, but a different way to go about it. And I'm pretty dead set on this, and this is still what I want to do. But I apply for political science. I think political science is going to be great for law school. Spoiler for a little bit later, it's not. It really doesn't help you at all. In fact, it might make things harder. But I apply to Penn State and they had a 3+3 program. And in fact, that's not what I ended up doing, but I applied there for that very reason. You did political science and then you would get into their law school in 3 years and graduate in 3 years, meaning instead of a 7 year kind of schooling, you would only do six, which sounded great. So I applied to Penn State, I got in, and I didn't do things normally. I joined the Schreier Honors College. I actually ended up writing my thesis on the Protection of Lawful Commerce and Arms Act, and I enjoyed it thoroughly. But the classes there were very different. Of course, if you've ever talked about or heard about any type of college or university, you know ideologically, they're pretty progressive. And if you've watched this channel at all, you know I'm not progressive in the slightest. In fact, I'm probably more conservative than most people out there. And that, of course, caused issues. I'll give a few different examples, but I think it's probably the best. If you look at this photo right here, this is a screenshot of what my political science advisor and my thesis advisor had posted before the 2024 election. The post was now taken down, so you can never find it, and I'll blur out his name because I still hold some respect for him. But I have had examples of when I would get points docked against me simply for my opinions. First was in my comparative politics class. The professor was Ukrainian. I mentioned one time that I think the Ukrainians should not be a unitary state and that the people should be free to join Russia if they want. Now, before that, I got 10 out of 10s on everything. If you know anything about me, I'm a little bit of a tryhard. I do my absolute best. I'm very sad when I don't get 100% or better, at least when it came to college and high school. I then, from then on, got 7 out of 10s on every single thing I turned in. Of course, we did a daily question, and that's what this is referring to. She couldn't get away with docking me that much on exams, ones that I scored over 100% on, because I did the bonus questions. I did everything, basically. I like seeing a high number. But that was every single time. Just because I didn't think Ukraine should oppress its people in a way that we don't oppress our people over here. Our states have different levels of ability for their constituents. We have voters on different things. We have referendums, we have actual politicians we vote in, we have constitutional amendments, now state constitutional amendments. But still, we see a lot of democracy in this. Ukraine doesn't have that and didn't have that at the time. This class happened before the whole Russia thing that's still going on. I want to make that clear. But I've also had professors, including my advisor, which I didn't realize this occurred until years later. I would say my opinion in class. This was something that was asked for quite often. And every single time I would say an opinion that was controversial, it would always be argued against by everybody, including the professor. I would talk about the Protection of Lawful Commerce and Arms Act and whether or not firearms are tools or not. Now, everybody laughs at me when I say that firearms are tools and not just killing machines. My bad that I say the truth about it. I can use anything to hurt someone. I can use this pen. I can use this thing on the wall. I can take it off and I can just beat somebody with it. Now, if you were talking about the intended purpose, yeah, guns are meant to shoot things. So are nail guns. If I advertise it as able to penetrate through anything, you best believe somebody's going to use it to attack somebody and hurt somebody. But I'll move on from that tangent a little bit. I answered one of the questions on our essay exams. I was supposed to answer it in the way that said DOMA is a federal law that was passed through Congress. Now, one thing that I'll add some context to, my professor always harped on the fact that there is no such thing as a state Congress. And that is correct. They are usually general assemblies or state legislatures. State legislatures are not state Congresses. I want to make that very clear. I put in my essay exam that it was a Congress passed law. And if you don't know anything about DOMA, I'm not going to go into it here, but just know that it was passed by Congress and it's a federal law. He docked me points for that. And it was always these little nitpicky things, ones that are correct, but he didn't like the way that I said it. I followed his exact playbook and I got through it. But this is something that continues on. And this is that same exact professor that posted that he can barely even associate with conservatives because they support Nazis. I'm conservative. I voted for Trump. I've already talked about this. But we'll move on past that into my application process for law school. I didn't end up getting into Penn State because I was put on the wait list and they never really talked to me. So I eventually dropped my letter of interest to them. Penn State had treated me poorly, mainly due to my advisor. I don't know if he did this on purpose. I think advisors in general at colleges are really stupid, but I had to take summer courses to be able to do the 3+3 thing, and then Penn State just never followed up with me, so I decided, screw Penn State. I don't like Penn State. I like the wrestling program, and that's about it. I'll usually root against them in football too, so this past year was pretty good. But I applied to law school and I applied to the one I'm at now. I'm not going to say what it is, but I got in really quickly. I was able to apply with the fact that I did legal research, doing the Protection of Lawful Commerce and Arms Act, looking at the different state laws, looking at the different laws federally for firearms, looking all the way back to kind of the rationales and the historical backing. And I will say, I will brag, I started writing it before the Brewing case came out, and I had the exact same arguments that the Brewing case had. Who would have thought? Most people don't even think Dred Scott as something that would involve firearms. I found that, and so did the justices on the Supreme Court, and that made my day, my week, my year. That was awesome. But I applied with this information and I got in. And I got a pretty hefty scholarship too. I put a lot of work into my research and into my applications. So, when I actually got into law school, how useful was my degree? And the answer is it isn't. It isn't really at all. You can get into law school with any type of 4-year degree, and in fact, it's usually better to get a science based one if you ever want to go into patents or something like that. We took an entrance exam, one at the very beginning. Now, you didn't need to pass this, you could retake this later on, but let me tell you, a lot of people didn't pass it, and it was a basic civics exam. Now, I scored pretty high on it just based off of my knowledge before. We were supposed to have a textbook, and I didn't buy the textbook because I didn't know we were supposed to have a textbook because I apparently didn't see the email. My email had something buggy with it. But I scored like a 23 out of 25, which was pretty good. It was well past what we were required to get, but it turns out everybody else missed the memo. We had over half of our class fail the exam, and we got to the point where we had to lower it past the 50% to even have the majority of the class pass. But aside from that, I found myself thinking that I knew what was going on in law school, and that was a detriment to me. I went in there with knowledge of certain cases, like Marbury versus Madison. You have the Brandenburg test for the First Amendment. You have different constitutional cases, of course, like Dobbs v. Jackson, I had some idea of substantive due process and other types of torts like intentional infliction of emotional distress. But I found my apparent knowledge of these things beforehand to be detrimental. I thought that I knew what it was, and I wasn't able to perform as well on exams as I wanted to because I went in there with a much more rigid type of thinking than a fluid type of thinking. Now, if you know anything about law school, you'll know that they don't teach you how to apply the law. They teach you how the law is where it is and how it got there. There is some application of the law with the IRAC and CRAC formats on exam writings and things like that, but that is to hypotheticals and not in real life. For example, if I am going to law school in Pennsylvania, which I am learning case law from the entire country, not just Pennsylvania. So, me thinking that I was going to get a better education for Pennsylvania law in a Pennsylvania law school is not true. It did not help me in the slightest. But now that I've kind of torn down my ego, I'm a lot more laid back than what I used to be. You may not be able to tell, but that is very true. I had some type of stick up my ass for a long time that I finally yanked out of there once I got humbled by some of my exam grades. But my political science degree really hasn't helped me there. And it got me thinking a lot. What happens if I don't want to do this law thing? Say I become a lawyer, I pass my bar, whatever, and say 20 years down the line, what could I do with my political science degree? Hell, if for whatever reason I decide to not do law school tomorrow, what would I do with my political science degree? And the answer is almost nothing. I can go work on political campaigns. I can go work and try to be a politician, work my ass off, take all the money from Israel, and then I'll be propelled to the presidency, I'm sure, eventually, depending on how much I say Israel's good. And then I would be the president. Me running against every single other aspiring political science student ever. Now, what would I have done if I were to change it? I have a very big interest in coding in AI, and I'm actually making my own like little AI law firm, and I'm trying to code it. And I really wish that I could have went to college for learning something with computers. If you've noticed anything about AI in the past couple of years, you'll know that they get paid the big bucks. And now I'm not going to be a lawyer to make a ton of money. Prosecutors, compared to other types of lawyers, usually don't make anything compared to them. If you're going into personal injury or something like that, that's really where the big bucks are. If you're going to represent, say, an NFL player or an MLB player, and you get some of that money for the contract, that's where the big money is. Prosecution is a set state salary or set county salary, depending on where you are in the United States, and that's about what it is. But I would go into coding. I find computers really interesting. I like building them. I created a crypto mining rig when I was younger, and I've built different computers since then. Like I said, I'm coding. I'm trying to set up an AI server with my old computer. I just recently upgraded. I know you can't see, but my hand is on my new computer. I would also maybe look at something in business and marketing, or say in finance. I find stocks and the stock market and the different types of kind of research for it to be very interesting and technical. Now, I will say I'm not the best at math, so maybe these two fields that I've mentioned may not be the best, but I would have changed what I had learned going into those fields. I would have honed in on math much better than a lot of my research skills. I would probably still sharpen my research skills, but a little less focused, more numbers focused. Those are for the smart nerd people. I'm just somebody that reads books all the time, like these ones right here. So I would have gone maybe into being a stockbroker, somebody to do with financial advice or something like that. I really spent a couple years ago a lot of time going into personal finance and how I can make myself better. If you haven't put your money into a high yield savings account yet, you better do it now. That's free advice. You're getting free money from interest. Northwest, PNC, JP Morgan, Goldman Sachs, none of these things are giving you near as much interest as you could get with different banks. Of course, do your own research into that before you just throw it in. But I could use my knowledge or my ability to adapt and my interest in learning in a different field. I still could have become a lawyer. I wanted to become a lawyer. But knowing what I know now, I know political science did not help me once I got here. And frankly, it didn't really help me get here either. I was able to graduate with good grades, but if I studied hard in these other things or did really well on projects and exams, I could be in law school with a biology degree, with a, I don't know, psychology degree. I actually have a minor in psychology, so I find that interesting too. I find a lot of things interesting. But I could be here with a dance theory degree, with a finance degree, with a Spanish degree, with a degree in anything, as long as it's a 4 year degree. I think they might accept associate's degrees. I probably am wrong with that, but to get into an ABA accredited school, there are some requirements, and as long as you pass them, because they're very open ended, you can get into law school. Hell, there are a lot of people that I've seen become lawyers that you look at them, they're like, how the hell did you become a lawyer? It's so hard to get into the school. How did you get through it? But I want to wrap this all up and say I regret going for political science because I believe that there are other things that I could have done with my time to better equip me for the future. I've been working on certain things like marketing certificates, digital marketing certificates, SEO engineering, and different things like that. I've taught myself programming languages. I can read the news and read about politics on the internet. Hell, I can prompt Gemini or ChatGPT or Claude to teach me about civics. I don't need to go to college to do that, and frankly, I shouldn't have. Now, you may be saying, Mason, you can do that with just about anything, but there is a certain level of technicality that you cannot get from, or excuse me, for things like engineering or biology or nursing or things like that. Hell, nursing's more of a certification than it is a school like degree. It is a degree, don't get me wrong, but it's more of a certification. You need to do that to get the job. But you don't have that level of technical insight. Political science, you can just look it up. I feel like I wasted all of my time there. And if you've listened this far in, I ask you, actually, no more. I plead that you do not go to school for political science. If you are any type of conservative, even if you're against certain important things like abortion and you're still a liberal, or say you're gay and you're conservative, or something like that, you will be looked at differently at universities. They will treat you differently because of your political beliefs. I got treated differently. I know there were people at the school that got treated differently because they were more conservative. Even if you are not conservative, do not go to school for political science, please. You are just giving them money for things that you could look up in your free time if you're interested in them. I hope you enjoyed this video. We have a lot of cool projects coming up. One's about 3D printing, AI, and different types of legal implications for different other things in the world. I hope you enjoyed this video, and I hope to see you next time. Have a great day.